Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Grace L. Williams. She's a scholar of feminism and economics who moonlights as a financial reporter and podcast host. She is passionate about what we're buying, why we're buying it, and how it contributes to many a bottom line. Her book, Give Her Credit, is the untold account of a women's bank that empowered a generation. It's the backstory of a group of Denver women who dreamed up and launched the first national women's bank in 1978. And changed the banking game forever. Welcome to the show, Grace.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. This is an amazing story that I'm ashamed to say I didn't know about. How did you come across it?
So you're definitely not alone in that this is a story that a lot of people, including myself, don't know about. I came across it through sort of a friend of a friend who knew some of these women who founded this bank and were looking for someone who could sort of go collect and tell the story. So it was kind of a lucky break for anyone looking to write a book, and especially a female financial writer.
Yeah, fantastic. So tell us the story then. What happened in 1978 and what were things like beforehand as to how this led to happen?
So one thing to note that's super important is that in about 1974, there was an act that came into play, which was supposed to give women equal access to the opportunity to have credit. And this had passed, and it meant that banks were supposed to be a little more friendly toward women clients. And part of the reason why these women decided they wanted to open this bank, even after this went into play, was because banks were not sort of coming around to them in the way that they wanted. And one of the other struggles that they dealt with was just being taken seriously in their jobs, working in finance, and wanting more, pushing for more, hitting that ceiling, the glass ceiling, as we always talk about, or the pink ceiling. They wanted more and decided, you know what, if we can't have it, we'll just make it for ourselves.
Yeah. You talk about the fact that some of the ways that women were addressed in banks when going in to get loans and things, men turning around, you have no idea what you're talking about. Another one said, go home and have children. I mean, absolutely appalling. And this isn't that long ago.
Yes. And that's the part that's also very wild to me is that, so when I was 19 years old, so this is about 20 years after the bank opened, I got my first credit card and I had zero problems getting it. No man had to sign for me. Nobody vouched for me. I didn't even really have a very well-paying job at the time. They just simply said, here you go. You can start to establish your credit. And it's super important to realize, you know, the woman that you're mentioning, who was told to go home and have children and didn't know what she was talking about, she was already fairly into a successful career with the opportunity to purchase and run the business and told these things. So 19-year-old kid with nothing versus businesswoman. This is quite a jump, right?
Yeah, definitely. So tell us about these women and how they went about putting this bank together.
So I'm trying to think of a quick way to say it. There's just so many components and so many elements to it. I think what's important to note is that they started basically from scratch, went around asking people who would entertain this idea, how do we do it, found each other, and sort of went through the various steps to be able to, first of all, apply for a charter, which is it's in the book, you'll see. There were a lot of steps to that, and there were lots of things that came up in the process. And they went from sort of a disorganized, maybe a little bit chaotic group of people to a lockstep formation in fairly short time period. And people had to take exams in order to be considered founders of this bank. So they went out to study finance on their own. Some of them didn't have financial backgrounds. It's just a ton of movers and shakers who wanted something else. Wow. I guess is the best way to sum up the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit more about the standout leader of the whole thing, who became the first and only president and CEO of the bank.
Oh, yes. You're talking about Lorraine Arulian and her story especially. I mean, they're all really good. I will say that I was spoiled for choice. on this one in terms of who do you start with, who do you lead with. But Lorraine, she had risen to the highest ranking level that a woman in banking could get to in Denver at the time. And that was through hard work, smarts, through being very savvy, and through just really loving the job so much. But like all these other women, she was hitting that ceiling and she wanted more. And her start is so fun too, because she became a messenger girl at a bank in her hometown. She went from fetching donuts and desserts to helping to write loans for them. Just an incredible, smart, capable woman who wanted more and wasn't granted that at the job where she was. So she moved on. Yeah.
And what happened to this bank?
So they were very successful during the run that they were the women's bank in Denver. In the 90s, it was determined that they didn't need to have that name any longer. And the bank actually sold. It sold, I want to say maybe once or twice more since then. But there are actually people who were original depositors at the women's bank who still have money in the bank. So
that's brilliant. What a great story. And were you able to speak to any of these women? I mean, have some of them passed, or are they all still alive?
So a bunch of the founders are no longer with us, unfortunately, but I was able to spend quality time with Lorraine in her home.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was a treat. It was such a treat. She has all kinds of wonderful memorabilia. She is a fun conversation. She's just wonderful. So I spent lots of good quality time with her. I spent time with a woman by the name of Gail Shetler, who's in the book, and with Judy Wagner, who's also in that book. And I spent time with Carol Green, who started the idea, FaceTime with these women one-to-one. And then in terms of some of the women who passed away, I was able to get a hold of John and Tracy Friedman, who are Betty Friedman's children. And Betty was quite instrumental in helping to secure a mentor for the group who came all the way from the East Coast to help them out. And also Edna Mosley's daughter, Edna Futrell. I spent lots of good time with her too. So a little bit here and there. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And spending time with Lorraine, I mean, how did she feel? How did she explain when she looked back on what things were like in 1978 and how and why they had to come up with this bank compared to what things are like now for women in business?
So she actually had been asked if she would come to a couple of meetings when they were getting set up, and she declined because she loved her job and wanted to keep her job. Well, I don't know if she loved it. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she wanted to keep her job and was afraid if she, if word got out she was meeting with them, that she might lose her job. So she came in a little bit later on with the group when it was more established and more formed. And she had it with the job that she was doing at the other bank. So in terms of her, just like in general and where we are today, I will say, so she's 91, I believe, and still fighting. She says, we still have so much work to do. We still don't have the things that we need, and she's never going to stop fighting. She's a dynamo in terms of the rights of women. Absolutely dynamo.
Oh, amazing. I mean, there's more women than ever launching their own businesses and doing incredible things, not just in business, but in banking and finance. I mean, things have changed massively, haven't they? But I can appreciate that there's still a long way to go. Is it still viewed as a man's world, do you think?
I would say that it's relaxing a little bit, which is good. But it certainly could do better, It could always do better. These are places that are founded by men for the most part, with a few exceptional women sprinkled in, which is why the Women's Bank founding group was so interesting, because it was women founding for women with a few men sprinkled in. And we definitely need more of that. We need way more of that.
Yeah. How fascinating. Did you find out any more about the men that worked at the bank and how they felt about it?
So I think it would take a pretty, you have to be a pretty progressive guy to like the Mike Feinstein character, which is in the book. So he was very well respected in his work and was willing to sort of mentor and help out. Also, Paul House, that's another man. He was pretty respected in his banking career too, and came on as a mentor to them and was very enthusiastic and sort of went to the mat to write to the higher ups in politics to try to get them to help get their chart approved. So there were definitely allies, if you will, for modern day terms. There were allies, and they were wonderful.
Yeah, nice. Good for them. I hope their wives were proud of them.
They better be.
Brilliant. So this must have been a dream project for you then as a finance journalist to write this book.
Yeah, this was definitely not something I had on my bingo card when I started my financial journalism career. But to be able to fuse feminism and history, finance, justice, to sort of go after a story that took me into laws that I wasn't aware of and sort of the way things were back then, if you will. This has definitely been such a treat. It really has been a pleasure. So
Yeah.
you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the title as well. It works really well. Give her credit.
It does, doesn't it? Because we all need more credit. I just think we do.
Yeah.
From all walks and aspects of life, we need more credit to give it to ourselves and to each other and to take it wherever we can.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if people want to get a copy of Give Her Credit, the untold account of a women's bank that empowered a generation, it's available on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Grace L. Williams, who we've been chatting with today. Grace, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.